She placed the empty glass of the wine on the luxurious table, while staring at the busy city from the top of the terrace. She was sitting on the couch while her thoughts were stuck on the one and only her love of life, Jungkook, the business tycoon who owned her and her entire company, the June Enterprises LED. He was the most intelligent man she'd ever met, with his incredible look and good sense. He never got caught up in politics. He always followed the right path, even though he had to make it work. He always treated her well, no matter what. It was so difficult because he didn't care what she did. He wasn't a boss who could force her to do things that would affect her personal or professional life. He was just a man. And the more they could together, the stronger their bond became. She whispered under her breath. Jan Vian was the most successful businesswoman, but because of a wrong move, she lost everything: her business, her luxurious life. She met Jin Jungkook after losing everything in the casino. He won everything from her in just a game, as both of them never wanted to lose. After taking everything from her, Jungkook asked her to be with him, and he'll give her back what she lost. The woman sighed deeply. But the fact is that Vian was losing everything in her drunken stage. Apparently, Jungkook saved her everything and decided to teach her a lesson for being careless over what she had. It's been 2 years they were living together in the same house, and Jungkook was handling her business as he asked her to take a rest and think about what she had done. The woman mumbled as she started pacing around the terrace. She stopped and looked into the sky when she saw the bright stars appearing out of the blue above. She smiled and continued walking, stopped at the railing. Suddenly, two arms wrapped around her waist, making her calm down. A deep voice murmured behind her. She closed her eyes as he let his head fall over her shoulder before relaxing. She asked as she turned around and faced him. They locked eyes for a few seconds until the young CEO pulled her towards him for a kiss. He looked at her, he smiled and nodded his head. She looked at him in shock. She asked nervously. They stared at each other and smiled brightly at each other. She smiled a little and looked back at the sky. He hummed and leaned onto her back, wrapped both arms around her. He whispered and planted a gentle kiss onto her shoulder before letting her go. She turned around facing him and smiled as she held his hand. With that, he gave her another soft kiss and took her hand, walking through the hallways of the mansion back to their bedroom. Django dialed his manager's number, his face serious. He called out. He heard a small sigh coming from the other side. Django smiled. He thought for a moment. There was a pause before Chang cleared his throat. Jungkook smiled before nodding his head. With that, he hung the phone as he sat on his office chair, smiling at his own thought as he continued his work. Chang instructed her when they reached the luxurious mall. She frowned a little, he shrugged his shoulders. Her frown deepened, he nodded in approval before leading her inside. She followed him to the jewelry section where they stopped in front of expensive looking jewelry box filled with diamonds and amulets. Vine smiled and touched it. Chang's eyes widened when he remembered Jungkook's word, buying everything she touched. Vine looked around and made her way out of the store. Chang immediately took out of the black card of Jungkook and showed the salesman. He said before leaving. Soon Vine stopped in front of the expensive bag store, and she entered, just wanted to see the new collection, unaware of the person who was just paying everything she touched before. Chang sat and entered the store. Chang showed the sales girl black card, who nodded her head in agreement. Chang nodded his head as he walked out of the store. He knew why Mr. Jeon was buying everything she touched, but still it was hard to imagine how many times Mr. Jeon had bought things for YN without knowing who did it. Chang sighed, looking at the stuff he paid just in an hour. Luxurious handbag, expensive jewelry with the matching outfit, iPad, airport, and other luxurious stuff were lying on the floor in front of Jungkook. He glanced at the man who was panting heavily. He glared at the man who sighed. Chang said in frustration. Jungkook said while looking at Chang's tired figure. Chang looked at his boss, surprised by his command, but Jungkook just ignored him and continued typing on his laptop. Chang tried to protest, but Jungkook raised his eyebrow. Jungkook snapped. Chang complained, annoyed. Chang made a face at him and headed out. She said while admiring the decoration. She smiled. Jungkook chuckled and walked beside her. Vine tilted her head in confusion before smiling widely. Vine looked at him surprised. Jungkook chuckled and put one arm around her waist, pulling her body against his. She looked at him adoration. She asked, looking deeply into his eyes. He whispered against her ear and left a light kiss there while hugging her. Jungkook interrupted her before placing a short suitcase on her lip. He added, pressing another one onto her cheek. She said nervously after a few seconds. He whispered close to her lips, making her heart pound. She gulped hard as he smirked. he whispered and pulled her closer. Her eyes widened in shock, and Jungkook turned her around to face the fireworks. He said, and the fireworks started. Wine eyes were shining so bright like a moon. Soon her eyes landed on a yard full of presents, which had written, "Bought everything you just touched, soon to be Mrs. June." She looked up and met his gaze and smiled before leaning her body against his. Jungkook wrapped his arms around her while smiling and pressed a tender, loving kiss on her temple. Her eyes flashed with crystal tears. He smiled before kissing her forehead. Jungkook took his step back and kneeled down in front of her, taking out the ring box. Tears fell down on her cheeks as Jungkook opened the box, showing her a sparkling diamond ring. She sobbed, and Jungkook cupped her face and wiped away her tears. Jungkook sat and slipped the finger into her finger. Soon the flower rain started over them, and Vian buried her face into his neck, crying uncontrollably. Jungkook kissed her head lovingly, holding her close and tightly. He whispered in her ear. She whimpered, and he smiled softly. She said,